Modern politics is a joke. You're looking at the screen, watching a politician talk. He's wearing a suit, talking confidently. That face should inspire confidence. But something feels off. You imperceptibly squint your eyes and think, is this for real? A familiar impulse rises in you, as if you want to look around and say, are you seeing this shit? In contrast to the perfect makeup, bright studio lights, the suit and the confident body language, what's being said is so idiotic, so childish, and so immature that it can't be real. Except it is. The chaotic cauldron that is society has spewed out this toxic brew, and it seems we have no choice but to guzzle it down. But we do have a choice. At this crossroads, we can either choose to shut down all intellect and join the masses in this slow-motion act of extended societal self-destruction, or grab a fighting chance through breaking down what brought us to this roadblock. I present to you the 4 horsemen of the democratic apocalypse. 1. Interesting over true. The currency of the internet is attention. A video essay that is true and valuable has no chance against a video that's interesting but based on wild speculation. So the benchmark we have is to make it true and interesting. But it is a hard bar to reach. It's infinitely easier to make content that will hold interest when that is the single objective. In the book, The Society of the Spectacle, that was written in 1967, Guy Debord notes, the spectacle presents itself as a vast, inaccessible reality that can never be questioned. Its sole message is, what appears is good, and what is good appears. The passive acceptance it demands is already effectively imposed by its monopoly of appearances, its manner of appearing without allowing any reply. Legacy pre-internet media landscape was nowhere ideal. It is biased in its own way, yet it at least had more of a stake for fact-checking and curation by editors. It was also open to more players competing, rather than the tech giant monopolies we have today. The social face of the internet is an ad business on steroids. With the trajectory we have taken, in no small part thanks to the major investors and boards of technology companies like Facebook, Google, and others, goal is profit. 98% of all Facebook revenue comes from ads. Through ads alone, Facebook is projected to make more than $120 billion in 2024. According to the latest earnings release by Alphabet, Google's parent company, total worldwide revenue for Google in Q3 came in at $76.7 billion for 2023, of which $59.6 billion was from Google advertising. That's 77% of total earnings coming from ads. The hard-coded rules we have in place are that the interesting and the entertaining will roll over anything else. With billions of users and billions of pieces of content, the net effect is that we have lost our tether to the truth. Our seemingly insignificant decisions around what we click, multiplied by billions, meant that we have inadvertently but collectively chosen interesting over true. 2. Inertia of laws. Not to be confused with law of inertia. Rules and laws that govern social life are in constant change, as history shows us. It's always more difficult to change old laws than it is to add new ones. That's why changes do not happen at a single pace, but in sudden jumps, and almost in a repeating pattern. First, some sort of major conflict, war, or natural disaster destroys the existing power structures and displaces the powerful people. Second, in the new vacuum, a new set of rules on how society should run come to be accepted and become the new norm. Third, a period of relative stability follows thanks to the new rules that are more in tune with the times. And fourth, rules inevitably become outdated, power clusters into few people, the ability to cope with the pressures of nature or technological change can't keep up, and then society ends up with another conflict. Yet another way this cyclical pattern asserts itself as part of the social reality is through the changing values and the attitudes of generations born into different realities. In the book The Fourth Turning, author William Strauss and Neil Howe talk about four characteristically different generations and attitudes towards life in general, each separated by roughly 20 years. Quote, "In fact, at the core of modern history lies this remarkable pattern. Over the past 5 centuries, Anglo-American society has entered a new era, a new turning every 2 decades or so. At the start of each turning, people change how they feel about themselves, the culture, the nation, and the future." End quote. Speed dims the horizon. Pick a moment from the last 1,000 years. A grandfather sits by the fireplace with his grandchildren, recalling memories and telling stories. The children can't yet tell the truth from fiction, but listen attentively as he tells stories of how to farm, hunt, deal with wild animals, and how to behave around other people. He tells about their customs, what is considered right and wrong and kind, how to greet guests, how to sit and spend their days. If not all, most of his advice is applicable and fitting. The reality that will be in the future for the grandchildren was the past for the grandfather. Through this, they are connected. Through this, the past can be a guide for the future. Now, in one breath of history, grandchildren and grandparents reversed roles. Not learning from them, but teaching them how to function in the digital world. The future has become more and more unimaginable. What was true even 30 years ago is now outdated. Gen Xers tried to learn from millennials, who now look to Gen Alphas. Do you see what's happening here? As things change faster, we as humans become more myopic, unable or even unwilling to see what's up ahead in our lives. The event horizon draws closer as we relentlessly speed up. Life for next generations becomes ever more unknowable. One thing about people is that we care less about what we don't understand or can't imagine. As one finds it increasingly difficult to understand what life will be like in the future, one cares less and less about the generations that will inherit it. Inevitably, people become more careless about the world they leave behind, more selfish, more reckless. 4. Extreme wealth is corrosive to democracy. I know this goes against the strong beliefs of some people and it's difficult to accept, but the logic is inevitable. First of all, democracy and capitalism are not preconditions for one another. Looking at China should be an easy enough example. Anti-democratic, but highly successful as a capitalist player in the world stage. Then there are the opposite examples proving the same point. Highly democratic Scandinavian countries who have the most socialist states. So, democracy and capitalism don't have to be buddies. It is in fact the opposite. Today's version of capitalism allows uncontrolled wealth accumulation at an extreme level, which allows the wealthy to influence laws and who gets to be elected. This makes societies less democratic. What happens when one or a few connected companies own all of the media outlets? What happens when politicians are funded by extremely wealthy individuals who have their own agendas? What happens when e-commerce companies make 100 billions more during the pandemic and banks get bailed out, while the key workers such as delivery drivers, nurses, and retail workers now make less than they did before the pandemic? The answer is nothing. Life goes on, because this is now accepted as the norm. Just another day at the office for politics in the 21st century. Okay, back to that moment of lethargic disbelief, looking at our screens and seeing the politicians getting away with practically saying and doing anything. Here is our dilemma. Everyone in their right mind accepts modern politics as being dysfunctional. It's a comedy show that's not even funny. Among a group of average people, it wouldn't be a challenge to agree things are out of alignment. But the next step, action to nudge any type of social change, looks like an insurmountable obstacle. It would require the hardest thing, to ignore the more interesting in favor of the boring. It seems collectively, our need for interesting stimuli for our brains outweighs the value of the social order itself. Or we don't make this connection, despite the fact that it's just right there. It's not unlike choosing the more interesting and pleasurable food that'll hit the spot just right, perhaps in sacrifice of our future health. So the four horsemen march. With each gallop, the interesting becomes more visible than the truth. Dusty laws stop representing the needs of our times. The past gives less clues about the future, while older generations lose their credibility. And the extremely wealthy increase their already outsized influence on politics and media. I believe humanity is resilient and will make it through, but it is going to be a rocky ride. Thank you for listening. One way you can help is share this video with your friends who'd appreciate it. Consider subscribing to this channel for more video essays on human behavior.